that with the more education, the better things could be for you. And they always encourage that. The other interesting thing about my childhood is that even in the state of Mississippi, I did not have a black teacher, a teacher who looked like me, until I was like in the third grade, because we went to Catholic school. And the nuns were white, and all the students were black. I didn't see a black priest until I was about 12 years old, and I fell in love with him because he had a beautiful voice, and I prayed every night that I wouldn't die and go to hell because I loved a priest. and I didn't see a black nun until maybe I was 13 in New Orleans, which has a large African American Catholic population, and I remember just staring at her. But so I had kind of an interesting life for a Southern person, because nuns were my first educators and did a good job looking at it now. I didn't think so then. However, I know differently now.
Very good. Okay, let's talk about love and marriage. So you said you came to San Bernardino and you met and married a San Bernardino man. Was that was that while you were getting your education, your college education, or did you?
Well, kind of, sort of, and in the early 60s, Norton Air Force Base was real big, and a lot of young women dated guys from the base, and a man that everybody knew and loved, Wilbur Brown, said to me one day, he used to call me Vaughn. He said, "Vaughn, you can't go around dating those airmen." And there was some friction between San Bernardino guys and military guys in those days. And he said, "I know what, you're going to date my friend." Like, I'm going to date your friend, right? And so he arranged a date for us. And I knew Tony, I knew his name, his reputation, all that. And when we first dated, I was like, right, okay. And it was sort of off and on. And when I graduated from Cal State and I wasn't finding the job that I wanted, I thought, well, maybe I'll move out of the area. And then our relationship changed and became a little more serious. And then I graduated from Cal State in 71, and we were married in 1973. And I had this list, and partially comprised by my family: get an education, then you get married, then you buy a house, then you have a baby. And I remember being pregnant, and our son was born as a preemie, and we still lived in an apartment, and that made me just crazy. It's like, that's not the way this is supposed to go. And a little bit of that is still in me, but I've become more flexible in life. And as a part of that flexibility, you learn to give and take in a relationship too. One. We have one son, and he turns 40 next month. His name is Anthony. He's Anthony the Second. Yeah, we call him Anthony. My husband is Tony. That was one of the conditions. I did not want this little Anthony, big Anthony, all those names that people create. And so And he's a wonderful young man. Mm.
Any grands yet?
No,
Okay.
no grands.
Now it has Elks checked off here. So I'm assuming either Tony.
My Uncle Harry
Okay.
was one of the exalted rulers in the Arrowhead Elks Lodge, and that was something he loved more than many things in life. And I remember one year he always went to the National Elks Convention. And one year he went and he came back and we were talking, and he said, "You know, I felt a little uncomfortable. Most of the men there were so educated and I'm not." And I said, "What you have to realize, many of them have that because of the sacrifices made by men like you. So don't sell yourself short on that." So, and as you can see, my Uncle Harry was a major part of my life. Because of him, there were opportunities, and my Aunt Alice's wife. There were things I had an opportunity to do, and my life changed and was so affected in a positive way. So,
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, so the job must have eventually come for you. And what was your work? And how did you keep yourself employed back in those days?
well, in 1971, when I graduated from college, there was I think the first time you started hearing of freezes, hiring freezes. And here I was, I'd done what I was supposed to do, and I couldn't find a job. And I looked and looked. And I was offered a job at the California Department of Corrections, working at California Institution for Women. And I thought,
Give me your degree.
oh, I have a bachelor's in sociology, and I have a master's in education with an emphasis in counseling. And I've never worked anywhere where I was a counselor, but working as a manager and administrator, that's what you do a lot of. So I did not feel comfortable that I could do the job. Because I was a naive young woman from Mississippi, came to San Bernardino, led a very sheltered life, went to Cal State, a very small institution at that time, and I just thought, I don't think I'm ready for prison work. At the same time, previously, I worked at the Home and Neighborly Service in San Bernardino. Another opportunity I was introduced to by Wilbur Brown. And one of my job responsibilities was being the Girl Scout leader. And the woman who was the professional staff person talked to me about being a professional Girl Scout person. And I thought, I don't know, I don't want to be a Girl Scout person. However, I chose Girl Scouting, and although later I went into government where I worked nearly 25 years, the foundation, what I do today as a trainer, I learned with Girl Scouting. What I do in terms of community engagement, I learned in Girl Scouting. Girl Scouts were doing diversity way back in the 60s. And so I credit them with a lot of the skills I have as today as a professional trainer. When I got a master's in education at Cal State, I thought, I don't think that's for me. And I discovered along the way, I do better educating adults than I do children. One-on-one, small group of kids, I'm fine. But,
You got to know your niche.
right, and I discovered it early.
Yes.
It wasn't after 20 years of teaching.
That's wonderful. Now, they have railroad underlined, and you shared with me that was your...
Yeah, I think that's in reference to my husband's uncle, Benton P.K. Blakely,
Okay.
who lived in San Bernardino for a very long time, and worked in human resources for Santa Fe. And back in the early 70s, provided or took the initiative and the leadership in providing many young African American men in San Bernardino with good jobs, good benefits, long-term employment, and some of those guys are just within the last 5 to 10 years retired from those jobs, and PK played a great role in that. He was one of the, I believe, the original members of WAG. He and Willie Roberts and Hardy Brown and Wesley Jefferson and they're black men started that organization, and black men are still leading that organization. Although now women are participating, I still see it as a black male organization, and it's always been, and it's successful and can be a model for the rest of the United States. Yeah, so that's where the railroad reference comes from.
Very good. That's such an inspiring story.
Mm-hmm.
Where, when given a position where you can bring somebody up.
And he did. And brought them up into jobs that provided them with opportunities to buy homes, to educate their children, to travel. Yeah. That's a,
That's the model.
yeah, yes. And he was a part of creating that.
Yeah. If we could just get more of that.
Yes.
Talk to me about your entrepreneurial adventures.
Okay. I mentioned that I started out in Girl Scouting and working for a nonprofit. There's lots of discussion about raising money. And I thought, you know what? I am tired of this. I'm going to go somewhere where I don't ever have to worry about raising money again. I'm going to work for the government. And so an opportunity opened up in Riverside County in 1975. And I went to work in with Riverside County Probation Department as a volunteer services director. And when I look back on my career, practically all of the jobs I've had in government were jobs that it was the first time they just created it. And so I am not afraid of trying something new. And my husband says, and he's probably right, that a lot of that comes from when my parents put me on the train alone and I was only 16. And so things that are not known, I'm not afraid of them. I will go into that.
You call it a pioneer spirit.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started there I took my experience working in Girl Scouting, and sort of moved into that position in government. And then I went from there to, at the time, when the HUD money was coming in, and it's still coming, but it's totally different now, for developing and working in low and moderate income neighborhoods and doing housing and community centers and fire stations and sewage treatment and sewer lines. And I didn't know anything about those things, but I figured if there's a book, I could read it and figure it out. And I did. And I went from there to my mentor called me one day and said, "Are you ready for a change?" And I said, "Yeah. You know, after 4 years, you either get tired of them or they get tired of you." And he said,